Well, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has finally given us a new form of what Magneton looks like in the future. What's that? It's in Pokemon Scarlet, so that means it's prehistoric? No, this is the future form of Magneton. Allow me to explain. So, Sandy Shock's an electric and ground type Pokemon that resembles Magneton, though instead of floating around it walks on its funky magnet feet while attracting a bunch of sand for quite the hairstyle. Like the other Paradox Pokemon of Scarlet version, we would assume that this is what Magneton used to look like and that they somehow evolved past this. But when we crack open an issue of the Ocultra magazine, we find out that some scientists claim this mysterious being is a Magneton that has lived for 10,000 years. As I've mentioned before, these need to be taken with a grain of salt, as in universe they're written as sensationalist pieces. But as the Pokedex is even less helpful, it's all we have to go off of. Also, scientists believing this lends a little more credibility. Okay, let's roll with that. After 10,000 years, a Magneton will go from looking like this to this. But as Sandy Shocks is intended to come from the past, how does that all connect? Well, it all has to do with the origins of the Magnemite evolution line. And that's the funny part, they're aliens, and I actually wrote a script for a theory video explaining all of this, but I never finalized it before the release of Scarlet and Violet. But now with this weird anomaly running around in Area Zero, it's the perfect time to connect it all together. Let's treat it like the script was a bunch of secret files hidden away for containing the dark truth. Magnemite and its evolution Magneton were introduced in the first generation of Pokemon games, and their final evolution Magnezone was added during Generation 4. A pretty cool bunch of bolts and magnets whose existence seems very enigmatic. Sure, we've gotten other mechanical looking Pokemon ever since, but even among the original 151, these Pokemon stand out. Were they man-made, or have they just evolved that way naturally? Where did they come from? Well, finally in Pokemon Legends Arceus, I think we have an answer. While the game takes place a few hundred years in the past, the Pokedex isn't fully held back by the technology of the time. There are a lot of wacky shenanigans involving space and time. In the wilds of Hisui, every so often, space-time distortions will appear, allowing us to catch Pokemon from the future like Porygon and its evolutions, or even the past like the Sinnoh fossils. But the most curious occurrence is that in this game, you can only find Magnemite and Magneton inside these space-time distortions. So that implies that these Pokemon aren't originally native to Hisui, but instead come from either a different point in time or a different point in space. Both are very believable. This is all wrapped together with the fact that Magnezone can be found in the wild, but is a single fixed spawn in the Coronet Highlands. We see it hovering around in the sky like a flying saucer. In fact, I think it's pretty clear that this was always meant to be Magneton's inspiration design-wise. So perhaps now this is the inspiration being taken and made into its new origin. Some more recent Pokedex entries might help to back this up. For Magnemite, they mostly read the same, stating how it floats, creating its own anti-gravity through magnetism, or that it eats up electricity from appliances or power plants. Even the Hisuian Pokedex, handwritten by Professor Laventon himself, doesn't have a lot of new things to say. The old Pokemon Stadium entry does state that it appears as if out of nowhere, which is a bit suspicious. Magneton is a little more interesting. While there's the usual magnetic stuff, Pokemon Yellow states that it generates strange radio signals. We see this mentioned again in Ultra Sun. And now Magnezone, which starts off with the usual magnetism and evolution facts, but Generation 7 once again brings something curious. Pokemon Sun and Moon states, 3 united generate magnetism. There have been many mistaken reports of UFO sightings when Magnezone flies through the night sky. As it zooms through the sky, this Pokemon seems to be receiving signals of unknown origin, while transmitting signals of unknown purpose. And from here on out, we get even more entries stating that people believe it to be from space or that it sends out mysterious signals. Back in Hisui, Professor Laventon says, I theorize that a special magnetic field influences Pokemon, changing its molecular structure and causing it to evolve. It emits strange radio waves towards space from its antenna. And now with this, it almost seems clear that Magnezone might have originated from space. The few Pokedex entries writing off people who claim it to be a UFO or that they think it comes from space don't necessarily disprove that it's an alien. More likely, with what we know about how long this Pokemon has potentially been on Earth, most people just might assume it's a regular Pokemon, and so they make the disconnect between it being an alien. But let's take a look at all the pieces we have and craft a narrative based on what we see. Years ago, a lone Magnezone got separated from its colony. Perhaps it flew through space and crash-landed on Earth. Or perhaps it was teleported there through some other means. It wanders alone, drawn to the magnetic nature of the Coronet Highlands, sending out signals to try and reach its homeworld. Later, several distortions tear at the fabric of space, bringing both Magnemite and Magneton into the land of Hisui. Stranded, these Pokemon make their homes on Earth, feeding off of electricity and using the power of magnetism to evolve into their final forms. Now with an antenna, they send signals into space, perhaps out of instinct, or maybe they're still trying to get a message home. So those were my thoughts on these Pokemon as of Legends Arceus. But the crazy thing is that it still works out in Scarlet and Violet's Paldea region. For one thing, when I was wandering around dangerously close to the Great Crater of Paldea, I found out that Magneton just hangs out there, exhibiting similar behavior to the Magneton in Legends Arceus, floating around an isolated location far above the ground, near a mountainous place of interest. Perhaps this one is still trying to reach its home planet. Okay, now what about Sandy Shocks? Well, remember, the entire reason that Magnemite and Magneton can be caught in Legends Arceus is because they're coming through space-time distortions, either from far into the future or their home planet far across space. If they're being taken from their homes at all, who's to say that some of them aren't sent back in time even further, all the way back to the prehistoric era amongst the other Paradox Pokemon? These Magnetons, stuck in an environment they know nothing about with a much higher concentration of primal energy, then begin to behave differently, becoming more aggressive and living closer to the ground and sand, eventually living so long that they look a lot different. And when it comes to prehistoric eras, 10,000 years is hardly any time at all, so maybe the original group of Magneton have all become Sandy Shocks, more suited to this environment, their metal bodies giving way to the next immediately available magnetic substance, sand, thus changing their typing. The whole idea of aliens coming to Earth long ago has been seen in other media, so I think it's pretty funny to see something similar in Pokemon. And who knows, with Magneton being a mechanical steel type, it could even just originate from the future like the Paradox forms of Violet. When it comes to time travel, who really knows for sure? As for what happened to all the Sandy Shocks, well, I think unlike the other Paradox Pokemon that eventually evolved into their current day forms in the absence of primal energy, they just ceased to exist, corroding entirely, but they were soon replaced with even more Magneton getting warped to Earth. These ones, living in a better environment, had no need to adapt and become like Sandy Shocks. So that left us with Magnemite and Magneton existing in the Pokemon world. Though that's just my theory on the topic, again combining what we know about Magnemite evolution line through Legends Arceus and now Scarlet and Violet. A very weird set of Pokemon, but that's what makes them so great. I think it's such a fun idea to give one of the most futuristic Pokemon a form like Sandy Shocks. But like I said, the previous theory is assuming those scientists are correct in their assumption of Sandy Shocks being 10,000 years old. But let me know what you think about our funny alien friends here. All I know is that we don't need to prepare for an alien invasion because it's already begun. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, especially the great Gators. Jackson, Justin R, Cosmo Zero, Michaela, Mr. Pig Puncher, Phantom Pyro, Quago, Volity, and Pastel Blood. If you'd like to support as well, get a shout out here as well as access to emotes and comments and live streams, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter for more memes. Anyway, this has been GatorEX, and I'll catch you all later.
Pokemon are everywhere. They're invading. Each with powers more awesome than the next. Pokemon are burning with flame power. Their whirlwind power blows them away.
Oh, no!
There's nowhere to hide.
Yikes!
Can they be mastered?
Pikachu?
Yes. The more Pokemon you catch, the more powers you gain. You can put Pokemon power in your pocket.
Gotta catch 'em all!
Pokemon Ball Blasters, Battle Figures, Power Bouncers, and Talking Pokemon, each sold separately from Hasbro.